Now for part two, what we're going to do is look at setting up a quick terrain. So in your workbooks, your first task, you've been asked to develop a map. So the map that you've developed, now we're going to recreate it. We're going to recreate that terrain, and we're going to think about things like elevation. We're going to think about things like where rivers or water may go. So this platform that we're given when we set up a new basic level, we don't need it. So we can just select that and delete. And then in the top left hand corner, if we go from selection mode into landscape mode, what we can do is generate a new landscape. Now to get something around the 80-meter mark, or where we wanted it, I found that if you set the section size to 15 by 15 and you set your number of components to 8 by 8, if we just drop into a top view, it gives us an idea of how big things are. So if you look in the bottom corner of the viewport, bottom left hand corner, it shows us that each section on the grid is approximately 10 meters. So we've got a level that's 120 meters across. So that might be a bit big. So if I change that to 7, we'll just have a look at that and we'll drop that in. That's about 100 and a little bit over. So that should be all right. That should be okay for what we need. So once we've got that set up, all we need to do is click create and we have our terrain. So before we start thinking about how we're going to make it look in terms of materials and textures, I'll just show you some sculpting tools. So as soon as you've created the terrain, over in your left hand side here, you've got your landscape tab, and if you click sculpt, you've got all these different sculpting tools. Now the ones we'll probably use is sculpt erase. You'll more than likely use smooth and flatten. Ramp's quite useful. You may touch upon using erosion and hydro and noise for things like rocks, but you probably won't need any of these bottom ones. But essentially what you've got is you've got different brush types. You've got one where you can use alpha masks, which you probably won't need, and there's a pattern one again, which you won't need. For what you're going to be doing here, you'll probably just be better with your different, with just your normal simple circular brush. Your brush fall off, you can experiment with this. You can have a brush with a smooth fall off. So if I show you what that does when I click, it affects it quite drastically, and then soft around the edges. You can have a sharp linear fall off, where if you do that, you can see it makes a different type of hill. You can have one with like a spherical fall off, and that's different again. That swells it more. And then you have one with like a really fine fall off. So they all do a very similar thing, just slightly differently. But you can control Z that back. Oh, maybe a little bit too far. And then you've got your tool strength. So that is just what it says. It's how strongly it affects it. If you turn that down to something like 0.1, it's quite gradual. If you turn it up to like 1, you can see it affects it incredibly quickly. For the size of the terrain we'll be using, I'd say it's sensible to stay between 0.1 and 0.35. I'd say that's a sensible figure. And the size of your brush, I can't see you ever needing to take it bigger than 2048. Again, you can just use that as a scaler. If for some reason you actually want it that big, you can affect the entirety of your map in one go. And then you can change the size of your brush fall off as well. So if I make the brush smaller, you'll see that work more. So you can see if the fall off is really low, you have a brush size and it affects it more where it's darker grey. If I change the fall off, it's actually less effective in the middle and it's more gradual. So you can this could be useful for painting things like peaks. Now for moving around, again, as in previous video, you just hold right click, use W, A, S, and D to move. Now because we've got a landscape that's quite big, you'll notice it is moving fairly slowly. So in the top right hand corner of your viewport, you've got a camera icon. If you click on there and just move that up to like 3, you can move much quicker. So if I just take that back a little bit, so yeah, you can just have a go at experimenting with this, just playing around with those different tools. Obviously use your map for guidance, and I would say probably think about how big you want your level in terms of dimensions. You don't want to make it too big, because remember, once you've built your terrain, you've actually got to block this level out using simple geometry first, and then swapping that out with some assets and making it kind of look more realistic, with some high quality 3D assets and things. But for now, I would just concentrate on getting yourself comfortable with some of these different tools.